I met Syndey first, and we cackled away at the IOD, and then she introduced me to Lucinda, and their stories are inspirational because they're at two different points in their journey, both in the gluten-free, free-from world, just so it would be really inspirational to hear from them. So I would actually like you guys to introduce yourselves.
How do you do this?
You go.
Okay.
Go for it.
I'm Syndey.
And use the mics for...
Oh, for the purpose of this?
Yes.
I'm like, oh, crazy. Okay. Is this on?
Should be, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Sorry, I've got a question.
Yes.
What's that? Is there someone filming or?
Yes, so Product Forge, they do live streams, so you guys will be able to see this later on as well.
Nice.
So ask all the questions you can. This could be your moment to become an internet sensation. Yep.
So I'm Syndey. I'm the founder and director of The Healthy Crop, and we are creating a range of sorghum grain products to go across retail categories and channels. And sorghum is a gluten-free and drought-resilient crop, actually one of the most important grains in the world, but has not been used in the Western world. Our first product is Lil Pop, which is a quirky, fun brand, which is popped sorghum grain, and it looks like teeny tiny popcorn that doesn't get caught in your teeth.
It's delicious.
Hi, I'm Lucinda, founder of Genius Foods. I developed the bread in my kitchen about 13 years ago now. It took 3 years, and then launched Genius Bread, a brown and white loaf, in 2009, literally from a standing start, having just scaled up the bread, and then launched into 700 stores across the UK, so that was quite a shock. And then since then it's been totally mad. So we're now 10 years old, and we sell in Europe, in Australia, in America, in Scandinavia, across the UK. We're in all the retailers in the UK. We have 300 staff based in Edinburgh in an office and a bakery in Bathgate, and we turn over 30 million a year.
Wow. So I'm sure you're all wondering now, when Syndey said that sorghum isn't used so much in this part of the world, tell us about your journey of finding sorghum grain.
So I've been aware of sorghum grain for a really, really long time. I've been gluten-free since I was 7 years old, where there were not good gluten-free products. And where I grew up in this tiny town of 150 people, and we were growing a lot of corn and soya, and some summers we would have drought seasons, and we are learning about saving water resources from when we are in kindergarten or preschool, and always told to turn off the tap in between brushing our teeth, taking short showers, etc. So a lot of farmers in the area, because sorghum's drought resilient, were switching their corn and soya fields to sorghum fields to better utilize their resources. For the farmers, it was saving money. For a brand and for us, it's saving water resources, and it's something that people don't think about a lot. In plant-based products, people think about it in meat products, that it's an incredibly water-intensive product. But to give you a shocking statistic on the importance of this is only 2.5% of the world's water is actually fresh water, and 70% of that is going to agriculture. So it's actually really, really important to be able to grow crops that don't require irrigation.
And how did you find your first supplier?
Through Instagram. I spoke to 50 grain suppliers in 8 countries, spanning 5 continents, working every time zone, speaking to all sorts of strange farmers. And it was through Instagram that someone wrote to me and was like, I think sorghum's cool. It's like, great. Why are you writing me? And he was like, I once did a podcast and I interviewed the market development director of the United Sorghum Checkoff program. Do you want an introduction? I was like, what on earth is that? He introduced me to him, who introduced me to a farmer. And this farmer was like, I can't help you. You need something very specific, but I'm going to the Texas Commodity Show. Do you want me to take a list of questions to you? Questions to the show for you? And I was like, sure, I'll send this list of questions, but there's no way this random farmer in a tiny town in North Carolina was going to take this list to me. And he's like, my son studies small commodities. Now, ma'am, anything I can do, I have a high school education, but I really think I can help you here. And he took the list over there, And he got back from the show and he said, I found your sorghum supplier. I was like, okay. And he gave me an e-introduction, and I've been importing their sorghum grain into the UK. So, the power of Instagram.
Networking at its best, eh?
You are the young generation.
Anyone else have good stories like that of finding a supplier on Instagram? No? Okay, the prize goes to Sydney. So, Lucinda, how did you get set up with your first batch of bread?
Yeah, well, the reason I'm sort of here at all is because of my sons. My eldest son is dairy allergic. He can't touch dairy. In fact, when he was little, if it touched his cheek, he'd go into anaphylactic shock, which was quite traumatic. And then my second son was diagnosed with a really severe gluten intolerance when he was 3, because he was actually just fading away in front of us. He was just really tiny and very dry skin, very dark under his eyes, always whinging, never ate properly. He would always pick cake and biscuits. I mean, how many children do that? And he just wasn't well. And we were really worried about him, and we realised that every time he had pasta or biscuits or cakes, he started to get worse and worse and worse, and he would lie on a chair with a really, really sore tummy and then rush to the loo. And it was just awful to see this poor little child not doing well, and it became really pretty obvious. It was every time we gave him wheat. So the doctor said, take him off wheat, let's see how he gets on. And literally within a week, he said, Mummy, I don't feel sick anymore, which made me feel really rubbish, because I think he'd been feeling sick really ever since I'd weaned him, which doesn't make you feel particularly proud as a mother, but I hadn't understood what the problem was. And then literally within a couple of months, he put on 2 kilos. He was a new child. He had the energy again. He was completely transformed. But what we realised is that there wasn't really any food out there that was worth buying. The bread at the time in 2005 was dry and hard, like little bricks, in sort of all this plastic, maybe 2 or 3 layers of plastic with silicone sachets in it, and an ingredients deck this long.
Sounds delicious.
And it was just revolting, and it was £7 a loaf, and you had to microwave it or toast it to make it edible, and then even then it wasn't edible. And as consumers said a bit later on, it was like the bottom of a budgie's cage, basically. You touch it and it would just crumble into bits. And it just made me really cross, because all the packaging said how delicious this bread was. And I just thought, no, it's not, it's utterly disgusting. And actually someone needs to change this, because bread is a staple. And, you know, if you think about how often you eat bread, it's probably more than once a day. And it's the ultimate convenience food, but it's highly inconvenient to make from scratch. It takes 4 hours to make a loaf of bread. And particularly gluten-free bread, which is a whole different ballgame. So I just felt that to allow my son to take a normal packed lunch to school, and for us to travel easily, and for him to have a normal children's party with his mates, I needed to try and sort it out. And the reason I thought that I could probably give it a go is because of my background, which was I've studied physiology at university, so I'm a scientist really, although I'm a sort of pretend scientist compared to all the people I now work with at Edinburgh University. I've only got a degree, I don't have a doctorate or anything like that. But I'd also trained at Leeds School of Food and Wine in London, written their book on the functionality of ingredients, all the mainstream ingredients that we use all the time. And then I'd written a book on how to cook for food allergies, which was taking all the mainstream ingredients out and finding a way to make those foods well without those functional ingredients. And so I just thought, golly, you know, if anyone's going to try and sort this out, it probably needs to be me. And, you know, I just got going and went to my local health food store, brought Real Foods on Broughton Street, and just scanned the shelves for ingredients that I thought might work well in bread, and just got blending, and you know, made thousands of loaves at home, and broke my oven twice, and broke my Magimix, and finally got there. But it was in short, it was for my son.
And your story is quite inspirational, because you didn't start with a small batch, did you? Trying to start with local bakeries, or?
No, well, while I was working on it, I would turn up to school completely covered in flour, because I just literally, the moment the kids were at school or asleep, I would make bread. And I spent my entire life covered in flour. And there were some quite intrigued parents at the school saying, "What on earth are you doing? Why are you always covered in flour?" Well, it's because I'm coming up with a gluten-free bread, obviously. And there was a father at the school who would say, "Well, you know, I'd love to try it when you're there. It'd be really good to try it." And he had to wait for 2.5 years to try it because I didn't
Really
want
wanted
him.
that bread.
Well, I didn't want him to try it until I'd commercialised it.
Yeah.
I wanted to scale it up. I didn't want him to try something out of my kitchen, and I think that is important if you're going to be taken seriously. That you need to have gone through the pain of scaling whatever it is that you've invented. It's one thing inventing something at home, but it's another scaling it for sale.
Yeah.
So I spent another year scaling to a bakery in Bathgate, which is, and we now own that bakery. But it was a long haul, and he tried it, and he said, "Lucinda, you know, don't know whether you know who I am." I didn't really know who he was actually. He was a father at school, and he said, "You know, I'm Sir Bill Gamble. I'm the founder of Ken Energy. I can pretty much have whatever I want, but I haven't been able to eat bread for 30 years. And this bread's going to make a massive difference to me, and I know it'll make a huge difference to lots of other people. And I'd like to help you take this to market, quickly, because I was thinking that I would find a bakery, a gluten-free bakery, and prove the market opportunity, and then go to a retailer, and then hopefully then scale up. But we scaled up immediately because we felt that if we didn't, someone else would go off with the idea.
That's so cool. Tell us about your scaling. From your first batch of popcorn to where you are now.
So I started in my kitchen. Initially I had this, what I thought was a great idea, and I was like, it pops like popcorn, so I went and got retail available sorghum grain, brought it into my kitchen, threw it in a pan, and entirely smoked out my kitchen, and actually nothing popped. So it was actually a really long journey about the science of how things pop. And there's a reason why a lot of people are doing popped sorghum grain, because it's very, very difficult to get right. We finally found a consistent retail available sorghum variety. I got air popping machinery at the time, and by air popping machinery, I mean it held 16 grams of sorghum seeds and was like a little home popper that you have on a Friday night. I initially started by saying I was going to do the farmer's market route, kind of like Lucinda said, of really proving that there's a market for it before I properly scale. And I did one weekend at Stockbridge Farmer's Market, and I had 8 of these little tiny 16-gram popcorn makers. And what I learned really quickly is that those little popcorn machines don't like going for 18 hours straight. So in my home kitchen, which I got all approved by environmental health and everything, it took me 18 hours to pop 220 packs, just to take to Stockbridge Market, with mailing labels covering everything. And my machinery, we had a little electric fire. My house did not burn down. I lived to tell. But I very, very quickly realized that if I want to do this, it's either all or nothing. And a lot of companies can go down the route of a cookie company can make it in the kitchen. They can then move to a commercial kitchen. From the commercial kitchen, they can get small machinery. But the machinery I needed was large machinery, so it was either we entirely scale production or we don't do it at all. So then it was quite the journey of finding a manufacturer, and then we found a manufacturer and in the process of switching manufacturing processes right now. So manufacturing has not been a straightforward journey, and I like to say people think I just pop popcorn, which is not the case.
So we've already noticed 2 commonalities. 1, work out of your kitchen, and 2, when you believe in something, go for it.
Yeah, I think so, because if you're doing it in a small way, someone stronger can pick that up as a great idea and run with it, and then you're left behind. So if you've got something that's truly new, you have the first mover advantage, and the way you make that work is through pumping money in, which sadly doesn't grow on trees. So you either have the money yourself or you have to find the money, and obviously there are lots of different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to take investment, make sure they're patient investors who understand the value of what you're doing. They need to be passionate about the value, probably to themselves as well, to stay with you over the long term.
So this is a question for both of you. What was the hardest moment you've had, and what is the best moment so far? Do you want me to go first?
Yes.
I think the hardest part was when Tesco said we're going to put you into 700 stores, and although we'd scaled up, we'd sort of been playing at it really. I mean, we knew we could make the bread, but the moment you're creating that much bread, it was a real shock to see how inconsistent the recipe, it was the recipe and the process was. And the trouble with gluten-free bread is that you don't have that protein that you have in wheat, barley and rye. It's a protein that makes bread elastic and stretchy and allows bread to fill up with bubbles. It supports the bubbles as it proves and rises. It then supports the bubbles as it bakes and sets, the protein then sets, and then keeps the bread in a lovely square shape that's then chewy and soft and gives you all of the characteristics that we all take completely for granted, but it's actually incredibly complex food. If you add water to tapioca flour or corn flour or rice flour, potato flour, which are all the gluten-free flours, you just create soup.
Yeah.
You make soup. You could drink it, or milk even. You could just drink it through a straw. There is no structure whatsoever. And so those 3 years were basically me, well, the first 2 years was me just literally blending over and over and again, trial and error, one change at a time, to build that structure. So we think of ourselves as structural engineers at Genius, because we are building structure in food that wouldn't be there otherwise. And what we found is when we took the bread to scale, the ingredients that we were using had only ever been used together in our recipe since we started scaling it up. So the interactions of all the 14 ingredients that we used, we had absolutely no idea what was going on in the bread. And we didn't really understand the specifications that we needed to be ordering from suppliers. We knew obviously it had to be gluten-free, 5 parts per million and below, but the actual molecular sort of structure of each of those starches and the process used to create the ingredients, we had not a Scooby, and no one else knew either. I mean, going to speak to all these experts, they didn't have a clue. And one moment we'd be making beautiful bread, and the next minute it would either be this big and you had to chip it out of the oven, or it would be like little bricks. And we had not an idea. So, I was there through the night for about 3 weeks before we actually launched, just trying to figure out how to make the bread more robust on really basic kit. And that was really close to the wire. I mean, it could have been a complete disaster. So that wasn't much fun. And then the best, I think, probably was when a few weeks later, going into Tesco with the kids and seeing the bread on the shelves for sale and sticking lots of bread in the trolley like every other mother does when she goes shopping for bread. I mean, that had to be that was a good moment.
Was a good kick like standing at the till buying your own bread?
Yeah, no, it is a thrill, isn't it, when you see your product on the shelf or
I cried.
online.
I would say the biggest challenge for me has been manufacturing. So finding a manufacturer to begin with. It's kind of a crazy thing because I am their customer and any new company is their customer, but you actually have to pitch to them as if you're selling something, and I don't think I fully understood that at the beginning. So it was pitching them the opportunity, telling them conversations that you've had with interested retailers, and getting them to actually want your business. They're tend to be at capacity already, and if they have a third shift that's a night shift, don't necessarily want to be running it. So to actually get a manufacturer to reply and listen to what you were doing was quite difficult. And then also, scaling production is difficult. So going from 16 grams in my kitchen to big full production runs has been quite difficult. So we finally found a manufacturer, and we could not scale it past a kilogram. So there were all sorts of technical issues that you just don't think of. So in a big popping kettle, there's an arm that's moving the grain around, but my grain is significantly smaller than popcorn, and my grain gets caught underneath the arm. It's something that you just can't predict, and as soon as you put more grain in there, you get two arms of just burnt material. So scaling that up, and we were at that machine for hours and hours on end, and do we add 10 grams more of oil? Do we add less salt? Is that affecting it? And not being actual scientists around it, and it's just trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. Good news is that we have further scaled production and switching processes, so that was a highlight, but it was definitely a low. We cannot continue producing a kilogram at a time, and we're now looking at about 100 kilograms an hour on the new machinery that we're on.
Wow.
So that's really exciting. I would say the high moment was being on the production line of our first production and watching thousands of units of something that you've made come off the production line. Of course, exciting when you see it on shelf or you see people buying it,
Yeah.
but to actually watch something that you've created properly be put together. I was sitting in retail buyer meetings with like, it'll taste like this, it'll look like that, it'll maybe feel like this is how it may look on shelf, but then it was actually all this theoretical stuff that I put together was a thing. And my manufacturers laughed and laughed. And we were working together for months, and I was like, just saying, when it comes off the line, I'm gonna cry. They're like, well, clear room, you can cartwheel down the line, totally fine. And then I was like, there are 65 laborers packing all of your product, and I had gold shoes on, and I'm like, can we take a picture over here? And a picture over here. Again. I have probably 45 pictures on the production site, where now I've got the hairnet on, I'm like,
Yeah.
ugh, not again. But it's so exciting.
You've had some quite interesting photo opportunities, haven't you, in the last year or so?
A few.
Yeah? Would you like to share a few of them?
I suppose you're referring to Downing Street. No.
No, I was referring to when you were in heels on the farm.
Oh, that was very, very funny. I was like, we've done a bunch of random pictures that everybody's asked why I wanted a picture in many situations. Yeah, I went out and flew out and saw our U.S. grain suppliers, and I was all very formally dressed up to go meet these very conservative suppliers. And they were like, do you want to go out and see how we harvest the field? Sure. So in my dress and in my tall gold shoes, I climbed up the combine and we went out, and there's a picture of me walking out of the field, glamour shot, in heels and a dress in the middle of this massive 11,000 acre property.
So Lucinda, what's your high point? The best one so far? Because there's many more to come.
The best, the shopping, going shopping.
Yeah.
That was good. I think there's been lots of. It's been a long time now. There's been quite a few good points. I think it was wonderful actually not long ago getting the baguette into France. We launched the baguette.
I bought it that night. It was so good.
No, we launched baguette into France, which I can't stop saying. I launched baguette. that was definitely a high point, and we did a sort of a pop-up shop in the middle of Paris, and it was just so brilliant. I mean, all these French sniffing it, and then they look at it. They were really suspicious, and then they'd eat it and go, "Oh, it's not bad." So that was really great, actually. And then when I was over there on holiday, seeing my cousins, because I'm half French, I was over seeing my cousins, and I said, "We've got to go to Picard." And I think I bought 9 baguettes. So that was really good.
They are very, very good. So anyone that hasn't eaten the baguette yet, you must go to Tesco tonight and buy one. So
They're in
good.
the freezer.
Yes.
And you put them in your oven and bake them.
Which Tesco?
All of them.
But you bake them off and then they become really crusty, because that's how, we have a French lady at the back there. You'll agree, won't you? They need to be crusty.
I will go to Tesco.
So, question?
How was it when you got home that first time shopping and put the food on the pancake or the bread on the son's plate?
It was a real celebration, actually. I think we cracked open a bottle of bubbly, and they didn't have any wine because they were only 2, 4, and 6 at the time. But it's a real thrill when, as Sid says, when you produce something with clunky equipment. I mean, that's the thing. A factory. I mean, I have so much respect for people who work in factories because it's not comfortable, and the distances are huge, and the kit's uncomfortable to use, and when it breaks down, it might take hours to put right. There's nothing convenient about working in a factory, and so when you've actually got your product moving with the kit that's there, because obviously you can't just buy bits of kit willy-nilly. It takes a lot of time to sort of just adapt. You have to adapt to the kit that's there to a degree. So it's a huge challenge, and you're working with people who don't necessarily buy into the passion that you feel for your product. I mean, they're doing a night shift, and quite frankly, they couldn't care less. They've been on their shift for 4 days, and they're about to have their 4 days off, and actually that's what they're thinking about. So it's about impassioning everybody and persuading everybody that this is actually a really exciting project that they're working on, and that and just getting people to have that pride in your product is a challenge, because when you work in a factory, it's a gritty, grinding job.
May I say mother's pride in a totally different context?
Yes, absolutely, mother's pride, exactly.
Question?
Can I ask 2 questions?
Oh yeah, ask as many as you like.
Okay, 3 questions.
3 questions.
Stop at 4.
Sorghum. I'm really interested to know what the amount of water actually is required to grow it. Like, how does it compare to wheat and corn on a kind of per kilo?
So it's actually interesting, and I wanted to be able to track that, to put it on pack. You can't really do that because it depends on the rainfall in the area, it depends on all sorts of elements. What happens with comparisons is actually corn per acre yields more product in a very rainy season than sorghum does. So you actually can't get this. And I've gone back and forth with the Big Water organization, and to get an average of sorghum grain, you can't really compare it directly to another crop.
Wow. So you have to do some lab experiments or something?
I don't know that we could actually necessarily do lab experiments at all. The big thing that we say is that it doesn't require irrigation. So in a drought season, it survives, where other grains do not. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't take a lot of water when it does rain.
Cool.
You could get some academics to look at it for you at some point.
Any academics?
Just up the hill. So Lucinda, do many people buy your products that are not gluten intolerant?
Yes. So we've got a number of different consumer groups. You've got people who absolutely have to live gluten-free. I met a lady, I was speaking on Tuesday night or something, and I met a lady who just burst into tears afterwards and said, my little boy is anaphylactic to wheat. And so she absolutely has to buy gluten-free for her son. And if you're celiac, it's an autoimmune disease where you can't absorb the nutrients in your gut, because the wheat, if you eat wheat, it inflames the villi. That means you don't have the surface area to actually absorb the nutrients. So there's that. Gluten intolerance, yes, you come off wheat. The IBS and ADHD, depression, migraines, you're probably better without too much wheat. And then you have the like-to audience, who are people who are training for marathons, people who are really interested in their health. They want to have more variety in their diet. They don't want to just eat wheat all day, Because let's face it, if you think about what you're eating, you might only have bread twice, but you might have pasta and you might have pizza all in one day. And it's all wheat. And so there are people that really try and reduce the amount of wheat they have in their diet to use quinoa or other gluten-free bread instead. And then the considerer group, who are the biggest group, are people who will buy into the category when there's absolutely no sacrifice whatsoever around cost, availability, taste, convenience, value. And that's the audience that we are really, really trying to pull in as key consumers, because if our products are pleasing that group, then they are only going to please everybody else, because it makes the products completely mainstream. So yeah, so it's a big group. So it's about 26% of the population now dipping in and out of gluten-free diet.
Wow.
It's impressive.
And sorry, third question.
Third question, and then we've got
Yeah,
others.
this is actually for both of you, maybe. Could you make bread or like a pizza base or something with sorghum?
Yes.
Could you make a bread with sorghum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not just sorghum grain. You could make crackers with sorghum grain because they're quite dry, but it would be part of a greater flour blend. And how many ingredients do you have to replace one ingredient?
We've got 20 in our.
So it tends
bread
to
now.
be. You'll see it in ancient grain blends. That there'll be a bunch of different flours to make it work just like wheat flour would.
Hi, I've just got a question for both of you. So I was just going to ask Sydney, is your product, is it around popcorn? Is it a sorghum based popcorn?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. So are you looking to diversify into other types of products?
Yes, so we are. So Lil Pop is just the beginning. Lil Pop as a brand is solely focusing on popped sorghum grain, but there's a whole range of things that you can do with it. Because of its small size, you can't do a huge amount with popcorn. But if you think about puffed rice or other puffed grains, you see it in cereals, you see it in snack bars, you see it as toppings, all sorts of things. So the idea is that we build out that range. But with sorghum grain, you can make beer out of it. The Chinese make liquor out of it. That's not where I'm going with it. But it cooks like quinoa or rice does. You can put it into flour blends. So the idea is to create a whole range of sorghum grain products.
Right, okay, fine.
In Africa, it's made as a porridge, delicious porridge.
All right, okay, I've not come across it, so I'll have to have a look. And Lucinda, so I'm eternally grateful for what you've done, because my daughter's celiac, so that's broadened up her, in terms of what she's been able to eat. But I just wanted to ask you, because obviously, I mean, she's celiac, but she's not, there's some individuals that are massively intolerant of any traces, and luckily she's not. But how do you manage that whole thing about ensuring that there's no flour when you're working presumably in a bakery that's producing other?
No, we only produce gluten-free.
All right, so your bakery is
it's
totally
solely
gluten-free, and that's how you would have to run it.
Yeah, otherwise it's difficult to sleep at night.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge responsibility because obviously we have people such as the girl.
Oh God, yes.
The lady earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, that.
So
can
is
you imagine? It would just be terrible. So there's a huge. I mean, we have a technical team. Who's of 6 people whose job is to make sure that everything that comes into our bakery is below 5 parts per million in gluten, but also other allergens. And we do a lot of in-house testing as products arrive, ingredients arrive. We do testing as products leave. It's a really big expense actually, just making sure that we're safe. We have to invest a lot of money in that and a lot of resource. But obviously, we wouldn't do it any other way. Because that's what we have to do.
And is that the way that other manufacturers do it? In terms of
I
producing.
think most main goods
in terms of doing
manufacturers absolutely. The retailers will check that your BCR. BRC. So it's getting late. There's all the sort of the regulations attached to gluten-free that you absolutely have to adhere to, and it's in their interest that they're not putting products on the shelf that might make their customers ill, because that's not going to do them any good either.
Yeah.
So
The one thing that I do want to say there, it's actually to the brand's discretion to decide whether or not they list all allergens there. It's not always on the manufacturer. So it would be the trust in the brand before the trust in the manufacturer.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
you have a question?
Yeah, so I think kind of touching on what I think is quite a good thing, obviously the market for gluten-free and kind of alternative wheat products is getting quite big actually. What for you has been your kind of main USP or your main way of kind of dealing with the increased competition to where you're going to still stand out within that market?
Well, yeah, so we're sort of veterans now, I would say. And obviously there is lots of competition out there now, which is natural, and it's a good thing because it keeps us on our toes. There's no complacency. I think where we are different is that the brand story is completely genuine. The brand emerged from genuine family need. So therefore there's a lot of passion in the business. We have lots of people in the business who are also gluten-free or have family that are gluten-free. There's a lot of people that just want to make that difference to people, similar to the people they know or themselves. I think we go that extra mile to make products that really are great quality. We don't just put anything out. We might spend 3 years developing a product. Some of our products have taken a great deal of time to get right, and we don't always get them right, but we really do go that extra mile because that's all we make. Whereas some of our competitors, they make wheat products too. So Warburtons make wheat products too. So possibly their whole rationale for being isn't just the gluten-free. So I think that helps, and I think we have a very, very strong consumer base. We have a very trusting consumer base because they know that we are really passionate. And we have that first mover advantage, which you cannot underestimate what a massive difference that makes. And you have to keep pioneering. That's the exhausting bit, to keep ahead.
But I think what's also interesting here is that someone once said to me, if one football team was playing football, nobody would watch the game. So actually a little bit of competition isn't the worst thing. I'm a hardcore Genius fan, and I like Genius because I compare it to another brand. And the other big thing is it's not great to have 1 million people in the space, but it's not only Genius that grew the category, but as the category grows as a whole, the more sorghum products that become, the bigger the category becomes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good. It's good for awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You had a question as well?
And then I'll get you a minute.
Hello. Sorry,
Hi.
last night.
So 30 million turnover is obviously a very impressive figure, but how does that translate? It would be quite interesting to see how it translates into loaves per week or per day or something like that. Just start trying to get heads around how busy the bakery is.
Oh my god. Well, we make bread all the time.
Yeah.
It's 24/7. We don't just make bread. We've got 26 products in the market. So the bread is part of it. It's the core product. Obviously, bread is the staple.
Yeah.
But we make millions of loaves. Almost 1 million loaves probably a month or something like that. A lot of bread.
Yeah.
It just sort of keeps coming. It just doesn't stop. And then obviously we have all the other products as well. So yeah, it's quite busy. And the bakery shuts 2 days a year. That's it. And the rest of the time it's making bread.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I go shopping, I try to stick to buy food which has got not more than 5 ingredients. And you mentioned you've got 14 to 20 ingredients.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the other ingredients? Are they all with chemicals or that are not healthy for your body, or do you use something that's actually quite natural?
Well, there isn't a single ingredient that you can use in place of wheat. Wheat is the most unbelievably complex ingredient. So we use 5 different starches to give you the same effect that wheat starch gives you in bread.
Right.
So the fluffiness and the softness, we have to use 5 to create that. So that just gives you an idea. So thickening the bread into a dough, that takes 3 different fibres. So that's why there are so many ingredients, because wheat flour is such a complex. The properties are so complex.
Yeah.
and a lot of the ingredients that we use are not nearly as complex, and so therefore you have to blend them to come up with the characteristics that you need. So as far as chemicals, we don't use any chemicals. We have cellulose in our product, which is probably the most sort of processed ingredient, I would say, and that's powdered birch tree. And what that does, that helps to hold on to water, because the other thing with gluten-free ingredients, they tend to dry out.
Yeah.
They become very dry, and so a lot of the ingredients we use are to try and keep the moisture in the bread over life, because retailers need life. They won't take something that goes dry after a couple of days. It needs to last for 8 days.
And if I go to Tesco and look for products, will I go to the freezer section?
The free from
section.
But we do
and the
also have
freezer
some frozen.
section.
Okay. Yes, and your products are they in any retailers here? No, it's online at the moment, isn't it?
While we're doing this transition, it's
Yeah.
all online,
Yeah.
and we've turned down retail listings now.
Yeah.
Okay, so just if I search for healthy crop, then I can buy your product.
Yeah, either the Healthy Crop or Lil Pop.
Just Google it.
Our social media handles the Lil Pops. Everything is the Lil Pops.
Let's go to Instagram.
We're still trying to figure out exactly who they are.
Well, you had a question?
Yeah, this is for both of you. So it sounds like you both encountered a lot of hurdles. You had put a lot of effort into like the process and development. Did you go down the road of seeking IP for what
Do you
you've
want to go
done?
first?
I love an IP question. Some people in food have protectable processes. A lot of it comes down to know-how, and you can't really patent the processes. It's also, as soon as you patent the processes, it's entirely exposed what you're doing. It's trade secrets, owning the recipe, owning the process, and making sure it's licensed over to whoever's processing it.
I think from where I come from, yes, we probably could have masked the recipe in a blend, but you have to start somewhere, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to blend the ingredients that we use right from the word go, because there was so much to learn about them, and because it wasn't just 1 or 2 ingredients, because we were having so many issues with understanding the functionality of all these different ingredients and how they're interacting, it would have been absolute suicide to have been, bagging sacks and sacks of ingredients together and then sticking it on the plant and then not having a clue why the bread was 6 meters high and then the next day, sort of 2 inches high, because you're just making your life absolutely impossible. So I don't know how else I would have started, actually. It's a shame, yes, because the IP wasn't wrapped up in a blend, and I do say to people now when they're starting out, what IP do you think you could capture here? What is the value? Don't undervalue what you've created. What could you capture? And sometimes it's not possible, and you don't want to not do something. Sometimes you just have to take the risk, and then you live with the consequences. We've lived with the consequences of the way we launched all the way through, but you live with them. Nothing's ever perfect, and you just get on with it.
But because in food companies, there's not a lot of people with really strong IP strategies, it's the first thing that you have to do is making sure that you are brand-centric, because at the end of the day, the brand is the most protectable side of your company.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Totally right. Yeah.
Any more questions? Anne?
Having focused on gluten-free, have you ever thought, Lucinda, of going down the line the lactose-free to suit your other channel?
Yes. In fact, most of our products are dairy-free as well. So we have literally 2 products that have lactose in. There are pies. We make a frozen chicken pie and a steak pie. Everything else is dairy-free. Right at the beginning, we were wondering whether, when you're choosing your brand name, you want to go for a name where it's not going to limit you in the future. So, if you called yourself Sorghum Pops, then you'd be quite limited if you wanted to try and do something else. And we were wondering, under the Genius name, whether we would do dairy, gluten, nuts, eggs, soy, because I've just written a book on the 5 main allergens in cooking. And we decided that actually the gluten and the dairy were the 2 top allergens, and that was enough. It was better to be known for specialists in those 2 areas, particularly gluten, because it's so difficult to make these products. Now, I think we feel that the market has matured enough that we could start to look at other areas. So digestive wellness, for example, is something that we're really beginning to get really excited about, and how we can make our gluten-free products even better for you through probiotics, prebiotics, fibre, antioxidants. So that's a really exciting area because gut bacteria has become such a big thing. So that's exciting. Yeah.
One more. This is the 4th one.
That was the limitation I set.
It was.
So, veganism is huge right now, and it's growing very, very quickly. And as with gluten-free and stuff, it's on a trend. But a lot of the ethos around veganism is not just about not killing animals; it's about being sustainable and having low emissions, low carbon footprint. So I was wondering how that stacks up. If you guys have done a kind of carbon emission calculation against your different products, and if there's any glaring bits that you feel are difficult with regards to transport or energy consumption or otherwise.
Do you want me to go? Do you want to go?
You can go first. I'll say something afterwards. Yeah.
Well, bakery by definition is absolutely appalling as far as carbon footprint goes, because you're baking stuff all the time. But it's something that we do really need to think about. I don't think we've thought about it enough yet. One thing that would be really interesting is to see if we could adapt shapes of bread to make the bread faster to bake. That might be one way that we can be a little bit more energy efficient. We send frozen product all the way down to Australia at the moment on frozen pallets on ships. Now, actually, energy usage is actually much less than other forms of getting things around. But again, that's not brilliant. But at the moment, we are constrained with the fact that our products are extremely difficult to make. And when we've tried to make our products in country, we've had all sorts of issues. And I remember when we took our bread to Canada to make the bread there for the North American market, the formulation that we finally got into a robust place in the UK turned into soup in Canada because the ingredients were different there. And it was an absolute nightmare. I was on planes, every few weeks, sorting out the issues we were having on the plant in Canada. So we actually just made a decision as a business to just keep stuff in-house for now until we really have all of that technology behind us buttoned down. I think we're getting there now. I think there's a chance that we could start to think about sending blends across the world. But it's an issue. The packaging is an issue. I don't know if any of you have picked up brioche tonight, but that's in plastic mat packed. Now, you could say that that's actually lengthening the shelf life, so it's reducing food waste. At the moment, there isn't a packaging that we could use that replaces that plastic. So, again, there's lots of innovation going on. There's all sorts of amazing packaging being made out of all things. I read something on prawns. Langoustine shells are now being made into biocompostable packaging.
Wow.
So there's all sorts of innovation out there that we absolutely need to be completely thinking about. Not just scanning for gluten-free ingredients, but scanning for solutions. So yeah, it's topical.
And picking up on the back of that, obviously manufacturing is quite bad. There's a lot of pressure, which is a good thing for retailers to go into compostable packaging. The shelf life issue is the biggest issue for any food company right now. I was recently at a trade show and it looks like they're actually moving along quite quickly. And the more that the big retailers are demanding this compostable packaging, you start reaching economies of scale in it right now. Because right now it's certain companies, small companies, that can take the hit on compostable packaging being 4 times the price. But we're going towards the direction of the price coming down and the volumes going up. In regards to ingredients being imported, this is quite an interesting topic, but a lot of people don't actually understand where all their ingredients are coming from. It's very, very limited what we can actually get from the land in the UK. So it is great as many potatoes and oats and beef that you eat, and fish, but we're not living off of that, and especially in 2018, even if we wanted to go towards that, people aren't going to change their diets to that. So I think what's super important in sustainability is that we're mindful of where we're bringing in the products from. So there's a lot of very, very water-intensive crops coming from horribly water-scarce areas.
And actually, that's one of the reasons you're going to America, isn't it? Because your supply chain shortens hugely.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it much more efficient.
Yeah, so we have been importing sorghum grain from the middle of the US all the way to the UK, but now we will be manufacturing our popped sorghum grain right on the farm.
Brilliant.
We're very lucky to have had Sydney join us because she's not going to be here for very many more days.
No.
Sydney's really brave. She's an amazing lady.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, thank you.
It's going to go really well.
Okay, we'll take one last question and then wrap it up.
This for Lucinda. How are you able to make the break into international market so quickly, like I may say so?
Well, I suppose it's because it's required. You know, if you've got a product that people need, it doesn't take a huge amount of time to get it into a market. So just talking about the UK, you know, once we got the bread into Tesco, because the demand was so great, within 6 months we were in all the retailers in the UK. And so when you've got a record like that, the sort of selling in story is much easier when you go to a new market. But what I would say is we found that it's great working with the distributor. They'll do a fantastic job for you if you get the right one, but they slightly go off the boil because they're wanting the new products all the time, and if you're not absolutely top of their list, then they will go off the boil. And what we've found is it's better to have people in country. So we have people in Germany, France, Australia, Scandinavia, and in Holland as well. Because they know the market, they know the retailers, they know how the retail system works out there, they know how to sell products in. It's so much more efficient when you have people on the ground in country. So I'd say that's been a really huge help to us.
Well, thank you both for taking your time to come and see us. We've got a wee gift for each of you. And we made sure that they were both gluten-free.
Oh, well, Robin, who started the whole thing, is just sitting over there. He's just walked in.
Well done, Robin.
Thank you.
So just a very quick thank you to all of our sponsors. We've got Brewgooder and Naked Wines that are helping us out with the boost tonight, which I hope you've all enjoyed. 4 Bites is a software company that have been sponsoring us as well, along with Scintilla, ESS, Gillespie McAndrews. Product Forge, as you guys know, have been filming tonight and tend to film all of our events, so you can see all of them. So go back on everything that's already been. Really good chats there. And then to Codebase for hosting the event as well. And if I don't fall, a special thank you to our featured attendees. So whenever you guys sign up for your next Startup Grind event, we'll see you all next month, I'm sure, you can request to be a featured attendee. So your face will be up on the website and then up on the PowerPoint as well. So thank you everyone for joining. Keep drinking, keep eating. We're here till 9, so chat away and network. Thanks, guys.